So the first question I wanted to get out to you today, Jake. Tell me a little bit about your combat sports background.
So I started in Weijiru karate when I was 16, and I got lucky. The first school that we went to, the first dojo we went to, was one of the highest ranking black belts in the country, Bob Bethany, and he's still practicing to this day. He's a pretty strong lineage, and did that for about 2 years. So started high school in karate. I caught a lot of flack from my friends because I was running around in my gi. I was 16, 17 years old. They were all on skateboards and stuff. So I ended up wanting something a little more intense. So, through video games and so on and so forth. Now, keep in mind, I'm 35. So Google and stuff, that was all fairly new back in, to me, it was in 2003. My family didn't get their first computer until like 2001. But you ever play Street Fighter?
No, I'm only 21. It's slightly before my time.
Oh no! Street Fighter is still relevant. So there's a character Sagat, and he practices Muay Thai, and we just thought he was like the kind of the badass of the video game. So we decided to look, is Muay Thai available anywhere near us? And the only gym that was teaching Muay Thai was 35, 40 minutes north of where we lived, and it was through the city. So the ride was just atrocious. But we said let's give it a go. They're offering a free intro. So me and my buddy Mike, he also practiced Weijiru. We went up, we walked in, keep in mind, we were like in these very traditional karate dojos. And there was a lot of, these guys were really good, the competitive team as well. We went up to this Muay Thai gym. And I mean, when we opened the door, it was it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, I thought I was Billy Badass doing karate. These guys were cracking pads. They were sparring. I mean, it was unbelievable. And we sat and we watched. And I'll never forget the head trainer, Steve Soriano. He was holding pads for one of his fighters, and his fighter was in fight camp. And he was just beating the brakes off of this kid. You could tell the kid was trying to hang in there, but he put a beating on this kid. And I looked at my buddy Mike, and I was like, "Yep, this is it. We're gonna figure out a way to do this." So I don't even think I had my license at that point. Mike did. Mike drove us. So we went back, and we were kind of trying to figure it out. We're working these little jobs, trying to make gas money, and we just say it's too far. We're not gonna be able to make it. Just happens that they moved the gym south of the city. So now that ride went from 35, 40 minutes to 20 minutes. So we hopped on it right away. And we started Muay Thai at 20. And I quit after the first month. I have no shame in admitting this. I quit because it was too hard. I was such chicken shit. But Mike kept going. And Mike ended up getting his first fight about 7 months later. And it was really hard to get smokers or interclubs down here at that time. So his first fight was in Philly at this like world famous boxing gym, the New Alhambra. And I remember watching him, and I was just this pudgy, just do nothing video game playing. And I'm watching my buddy Mike, who's in phenomenal shape, the lights, the whole thing. And he won the fight. It was an incredible fight. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So for a Christmas gift, I asked my parents to get me membership. I had my license at the time, so I just had to drive myself. I was going with Mike, and I was hooked from there on. I mean, I fought once every month, and once every other month after I got my first fight, and I just 6-7 years was just nonstop. I was there 6 days a week, completely in love with it.
Yeah. And how far did that love or obsession? How far did that go?
I mean, it was my existence. I mean, my social life suffered, my relationship suffered. From the weight cuts, my relationship with my family suffered. I mean, they learned to love me, but it also, it gave me a lot of opportunities too. The only reason we're having this interview is because I asked for that membership to get back into the gym when I was a chubby little 21-year-old. Yeah. But it also branched off into a lot of things too. It made me really take a look back, and I got back in contact with my karate sensei. Just the appreciation that I had after everything he gave me, and I went on to fight and stuff like that, but I was still taking some of those values that I had from karate into it, and just full circle,
Yeah. And obviously we're having this conversation with you as a coach. When did you begin coaching, and was that something that you were always interested in doing, or how did that come about?
It was kind of by accident. We at our Muay Thai gym, it was Boston Muay Thai Academy in Columbia Road in Dorchester at the time. We don't do belts. We don't do colored crochet or colored moncons with the armbands and the band that goes around the head. But we did like level certificates, and it was just so we could keep track of who's, how far along in their understanding the curriculum. And part of your level 3, which takes about 3-ish years to get, was you take on assistant coaching roles. And it's offered to you, you don't have to take it. But I was like, yeah, let's give it a go. I'll help wrap hands, I'll help corner at fights. And I mean, I got this almost the same high as I did winning a fight as watching someone else win a fight. And well, I didn't think of it as a long-term strategy. I thought it was something I enjoyed. When I had burnt out and I didn't want to fight anymore, I was offered to teach a class, and then I started working with fighters one-on-one. And from then on, I mean, I realized that fighting is kind of a young man's game. If you don't reach a certain level at a certain age, you're hopping in there with 20-year-old kids who don't have bills to pay, and all they do is train. Meanwhile, you're 32, going to college, trying to pay you all this stuff, right? I'm not going to try to keep up with those guys. So I would rather enhance the next generation's career coming up. And I mean, it is as much my night and day as fighting was when I was younger.
Yeah. And maybe talking about your role as a coach, I would presume with your Muay Thai and karate backgrounds, you are primarily the striking coach for these guys.
Yes. So for the New England Cartel, I'm one half of it. So when I say New England Cartel, I'm referring to Rob and Calvin. I work with several other fighters, but those two specifically, I am the Muay Thai coach. There's Sean Farley, who's the boxing coach, and between the two of us, we make up the striking contingent for the guys. For Mike Rodriguez, for Joe Lozon, for their camps, I was the strictly the Muay Thai coach, and I handled the majority of the striking with some of my younger guys too, Pacquiao O'Brien and Connor Matthews.
Yes. And how much do you have any role in terms of game planning or strategy, or is it simply what you've been told by maybe a head coach to implement into their game?
Yeah, so with the Cartel guys, Tyson Chartier is the head coach, and he's got a pretty firm grasp on that head coach role, and he does a killer job with it. And he'll ask for the wrestling coach, the boxing coach, my input, and the jiu-jitsu coach's input as well. And from there, we form a game plan. And because Rob and Calvin are primarily strikers, I do get to add my 2 cents, and I do see some of that come through in the game plan. But a lot of it is what Tyson sees and Tyson believes is going to get the win. And I think that's where the strength of the relationship comes, is that I have no problem, and I do my best to enact what Tyson requires from the guys.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to talk about specifically, we've obviously got, if we're talking about the New England Cartel, we've got Rob Font's fight next Saturday. And the very next event, although it's about 4 weeks away, is Calvin Kattar headlining against Max Holloway. Is it beneficial to have them two guys having fights booked at a similar time in terms of when they're peaking, in terms of their nutrition, weight cut, in terms of when they're ramping up them types of things? Is that a beneficial thing for you as a coach?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really cool when we get to consolidate camps. But I don't know how much I would love if they were on the same card. I mean, it would be great because you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But in terms of like where their weight and their energy levels are, like, they're also in different weight classes too. At some point, using a dehydrated 135-pound Rob Font for an almost dehydrated 145-pound Calvin Kattar might have diminishing returns.
Yeah.
So when we were getting ready for Jeremy Stevens, Dan Ige, I'm sorry. Rob was back on his knee. He was good, and he was a little heavier, not overweight, but he wasn't cutting weight, so he was, thicker, solid, and had energy for days. I think that was beneficial. Mentally, though, those guys bounce off each other. I mean, it's something else. It's a sight to behold. So I'd assume if they're both suffering together through the weight cut in the long camp, and then they both get to ride off in the sunset with their wins together, that makes the deal sweeter for sure.
Yeah, it's just something I've wondered myself. I suppose if, let's say, if one of them had a fight booked and one of them didn't, that they're in a different place in terms of how hard sparring's being taken by one and the other, and little elements of that, I suppose.
Yeah, if it's one fight is booked and one fight is not booked, yeah, the contributions will change a little bit. But you best believe if it's Calvin sparring day, Rob is on the other side or outside of the cage coaching, and vice versa. I mean, these guys they rely on each other heavy.
Yeah. Now, this might be a difficult question to answer, but in terms of striking, in terms of Muay Thai, in terms of all these things we're talking about, who is the most talented guy you've ever witnessed? Guy or girl? Sorry.
Ever witnessed, ever worked with? Just in general, I've witnessed.
We'll stick to who you've worked with.
Worked with. So, do my Muay Thai fighters count, or do I have to pick one of my MMA guys?
Give me one Muay Thai and one MMA.
So we got this young up-and-comer, Nick Rossi. He just turned 16. We used to have to lie about Nick's age to get him in fights, to fight grown men, because when he was 14, 15, we could not, in good conscience, put him in there with another 14 or 15-year-old. I mean, Nick has just grown man strength. He's ultra powerful. He's tough as a brick. And he picks up super fast. I'm telling you right now, if this kid, I believe he wants to go the MMA route, but not before he is a junior world champ and an adult world champ. He's an absolute stud. I think his Instagram is like Nick Rossi 21, but yeah, he's a stud. Keep an eye out for him for sure. In terms of my MMA fighters, you have to give it to Rob and Calvin. I mean, their adaptability, and so like all my guys. I mean, Mike Rodriguez, the two guys that Connor and Pat. I mean, these guys all pick up really, really well. You guys just see more of Calvin and Rob right now because of where they are. But in terms of like learning concepts and showing us what they've learned and backing up a game plan, it's those two. They're on another planet as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Ever witnessed, ever watched? Valentina Shevchenko, probably. I think she's one in a million. We won't get another Valentina for another full generation of fighters, I believe.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think people will look back on Valentina and will only appreciate her once she's gone. I think these performances
100%.
She's putting in now are so impressive, even down to the Jennifer Maia fight. She quite clearly won the Jennifer Maia fight, and there was criticism. It baffles me.
It's mind-blowing. The second the people who usually steamroll, like it with Calvin and Dan Ige, because Calvin didn't knock Dan Ige out in the first 30 seconds of the first round, people were like, wow, Calvin. How about Dan's really tough and Dan's pretty damn good? You got to appreciate these things in a different lens, but that's how you can detect the casuals.
Yeah. Or how about a different narrative? Maybe, obviously, Dan Ige is incredibly tough, but Calvin Kattar won the fight. Calvin Kattar, in my eyes, I remember watching that fight. Obviously, the time difference is an issue over here. So sometimes if it's not a big pay-per-view or a real loaded card, I will watch them in the morning. I remember watching it that morning and thinking 4 rounds to 1, Calvin. Really impressive.
100%. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Kick, his leg kick, his 1-2. It was masterful.
So, and this is also in the coaching perspective. Tyson and I talk about this all the time, and I've always thought this with my Muay Thai fighters, is that you can be blessed with a career full of first-round knockouts where your fighter stays healthy. You get the highlight reel and all that good stuff. But eventually those people are going to run into – Ngannou ran into a Stipe, and all of a sudden Ngannou didn't look too great. I think he did look great, but Stipe is that good. We needed, and I'm very thankful that we got a fighter in Dan Ige, because we got to see, or the world got to see, how Calvin performs. You got to see almost his entire toolkit. You got to see, I mean, his mindset and his pacing in rounds 4 and 5. Are you kidding me? Yeah. You hadn't seen that before. We got a lick of it in the 3rd round as a beat. The Moicano fight didn't go the way they wanted it to go, but I mean, Dan stood in front of Calvin, took what he got. We had to change some things up. Calvin had a busted hand, and you got to see what those championship rounds are like, for sure. You need those fights. You do. Thankfully, he's fairly injury-free, albeit, his nose and his hand. But other than that, I mean, it was a great display of Calvin's abilities. Yeah.
Well, if we could talk about Calvin for a little second, we've seen very impressive victories from Calvin over the past few years. Chris Fishgold, Shane Burgos, Ricardo Lamas, Jeremy Stevens. But in all honesty, I was probably most impressed with the Dan Ige fight, to be perfectly honest, because them things you're talking about, the 5 rounds, the pacing, his skill set seemed on point. I think it's good, as you say, to have that blend of decisions or maybe longer fights and early knockouts, because they work in tandem.
Yeah, and you also got to look at, if you're starting, and I tell this to a lot of my students who now acquainted with Calvin because I'm working with him, or anyone else for that matter, is go back and watch his Feely fight and go back and watch his Burgos fight. Those, in my opinion, are the 2 most important fights to watch for Calvin in his early, for sure. Because Feely, he took on, no time's notice of a massive break, and Feely was supposed to be the guy. And Calvin, I don't want to say came off the couch, but he definitely didn't have what he would have liked in terms of fight camp, and he put it on Feely. Oh my goodness. The Burgos fight showed that Calvin can be put in front of another good boxer and figure it out. And I would say now, the Calvin now would have finished Burgos even earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, Danny, it was great to watch that too. That's a fight I'm going to love to. I still get sweaty palms watching it now. even though I was right there watching it. I would, oh, do this, do that, do this. Oh, that was good. This, that, and the other thing. It was a phenomenal fight, and it's one of those hallmark fights for him, for sure.
Yeah. Now, maybe sticking on Calvin Kattar and Rob Font. Another interesting narrative I wanted to maybe just touch on slightly is their opponents. We've got Marlon Moraes for Rob Font, who I think if we could describe Marlon Moraes in one word, it would be power, because he seems to just have dynamite in all of his limbs. And then, contrastingly, with Calvin Kattar's opponent, Max Holloway, one word that comes to mind for me would be volume and pace. Is it a difficulty training two fighters in a similar time frame for quite contrasting styles at all? No,
not one bit. So going back to what I talked about with Tyson head coach, and the coach's ability to work as a cohesive unit. And again, we're a very small camp. We're a very, very small, tight-knit group. Nothing falls through the cracks in terms of, training session to training session, or meta, like the whole game plan, the whole 8 to 10 weeks or whatever we're working. You got to play to these guys' strengths as well. What I do with Rob is not what I do with Calvin. Same with the wrestling coach, because they have their strengths. Like having the ability to switch gears, you could say that's the hallmark of a good coach, but it's just one of them. A lot of coaches can kind of cultivate the same type of fighter, and you get lucky. Like I would bet that most coaches, good or bad, couldn't fail with somebody like Rob or Calvin because they're that gifted. But when you sit back and you work with a head coach like Tyson, and he tells you exactly what he's looking for and exactly what he's not looking for, but at the same time gives you a little wiggle room. And Tyson and I have a great relationship in that I can call him at 10 o'clock and I'd be like, hey, I was thinking about this for the session tomorrow, so on and so forth. So these guys' game plans, they're day-to-days, they're round by round in terms of pads, and then there's sparring sessions, stuff like that. This stuff is all thought out, written down, and hashed out a million times over every single one of their camps. So no, I don't find it difficult, and I definitely have to attribute that to the team, the information bouncing around for sure.
Yeah. Now, you are the striking coach for these guys that you're mentioning. Could you give me 3 people in the game now? It doesn't have to be UFC, just in the bigger organizations that we'll say, and let's maybe caveat it with not being world champions, who impress you in the striking today? Just the first 3 that would come to mind.
Mickey Holtzkin, Jonathan Haggerty. And I want to be fair and pick an MMA fighter. Striking MMA fighter. Max Holloway. I have to say it. I've always been a fan of Max, and we all have. Everyone has. Who isn't? You'd be hard pressed to find someone. But his, he's so impressive with what he does. And the thing is, he only has 3 or 4 things, and he recycles them and uses them so damn well. You think he's got this amazingly open toolbox. No, he does. He does have these funny things he'll throw, but he sits down on 1 or 2 core fundamentals in his game plan, applies them at different speeds and at different angles. And it's, to me, that's what's most impressive.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been more impressed watching a fight back than with the second time after the initial buzz, if you like, watching the Max Holloway Brian Ortega fight. I watched that fight in detail and was just marveled how slight it was away.
Yeah, it's incredible. His distance management and his timing is second to none.
Yeah,
it's really a thing of beauty.
Yeah. Should fans expect a belt holder from the New England cartel soon? Maybe 2021, 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying that as a fan or as a New England native. Like I just believe in work ethic, and I believe in what we're doing. There's nothing fantastical about what we do. It's the most boring, mundane, like day in, day out. But when we're there, we're not just punching in to go to work. We're very mindful of our practice, and we have an extremely supportive group within and right on the front. I find it hard to see these guys failing, and you have to assume there's going to be bumps in the road, whether there are more to come or we're done with them already. But it's just pedal to the metal at this point, and everyone stays focused in camp. I can't see us losing anytime soon for sure.
Yeah. Now, maybe this will be my final question. Obviously, my normal final question would be give me a prediction for a fight or something of the sort. We obviously can't do that today. My last question I would like to pose to you. The three people you seem to work with most in terms of big names on your social media platforms would be Calvin Kattar, Rob Font, and Mike Rodriguez. They all have fights booked. Doesn't have to be someone that they look like they could match up soon. But give me an interesting stylistic matchup for each that you would like to see. Not because it's the right fight, but just because from a striking point of view, you would like to see it.
So I always wanted to see, and we thought we were going to get it, Mike Rodriguez and Khalil Roundtree. We thought we were going to get that really early in his career. Him and OSP. I think it would be a tie between OSP and Khalil, and those would be ultra exciting fights. For Calvin, you know, if it didn't already happen, I would have said Shane Burgos. You know, I want him and Zombie to fight because I think that would be a banger. Because Zombie will throw caution to the wind, and he's threatening ground. He is. I think Calvin's a lot harder to take down than people realize. This coming from a striking coach with little to no knowledge of the grain of salt. I think him and Zombie would be an absolute slugfest. I think that would be such a fan favorite. And then for Rob and Uriah Faber. I would love to see him fight Uriah Faber, and that would be so much fun too.
Yeah.
Or Aldo. Yeah, I would say a tie between Aldo and Faber for Rob for sure.
Yeah. I would like to see that. Actually, thinking about it, that would be very interesting. Well, listen, Jake, it was awesome to have you on. It really was. I really enjoyed it. We've got the three fighters we've just mentioned actually all have fights booked now, I believe. We've obviously got the two we've mentioned, and then I believe Mike is now scheduled against, is it Danilo Marquez?
Danilo Marquez, yeah. Yep.
What do you think on that fight?
The first week of February, I think February 6th.
Yeah.
I love it. So I don't want to run away from grapplers. Like, obviously, you know, Mike had the issue with Ed Herman, and when we speak of that as team members and in our team meetings and stuff, we don't look at it as Ed cheated to win. Mike will say it. Mike did not win the fight because of the Kimura. It is what it is. I don't want Mike to run away from. I know the team doesn't want Mike to run away from grapplers. Yeah, we need a W, but Danilo Marquez is very, very hittable, and we're going to get to show off some of Mike's anti-wrestling, because I know there's going to be moments where Mike is going to have to showcase his counter wrestling, and that's what we want. Put the faith back in people and the brass that more than just a big knee or a big foot jab. And for these guys to take challenging fights like this, they play to their strengths, but they have a fair shot of winning. I think those are the guys I want to be around. That's the career I want to back these guys on. And I think it's going to be a super exciting fight too. Danilo is massive. He is a huge human being. Mike's not going to look like the big guy in the cage, and I think that's going to be a treat for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, as we've mentioned, I'm sure there's many more. Joe Lozon, although everyone used to say it was the perfect opportunity, his last win. Maybe he's got one more in there, maybe he's got a couple more in there. We're not entirely sure, but at least them three guys we've mentioned have all got fights lined up in the next 6 to 8. Okay.
Yeah, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Where can people find you on social media, Jake?
So one word, the Jake Man, TheJakeman. I also assist in the Hard Knocks Boston Instagram, which is the Muay Thai gym I'm from, and then NE Cartel MMA. So all of those social medias, you'll see all of the guys. I try to repost and recycle as much as I can of the big three, and also my up and comers and my Muay Thai fighters as well.
Brilliant. Well, it was an honor to have you on. It really was. I will just pause.